So let's talk about looking ahead to 2015 and the movies that we're most excited to see. We don't have to go into big explanations why, but like Roth, any 2015 movies that you absolutely can't wait to see?
I mean, it's a small year for movies. And there's just not much coming out in 2015.
Yeah.
I think that we're
maybe The Interview.
I mean, I think that we're, maybe that's 2016. I think that we're all obviously going to be looking forward to the same things. Star Wars, we're going to be looking forward to Ultron and Ant-Man and things like that. I will say that in that mix, though, and I really heavily, big time, for real, I'm looking forward to those things. Ultron, for the reasons I said, the things that we know about it, it really looks like it's going to be one of the more interesting superhero movies. Star Wars, for all of the obvious reasons, just that return. I loved the trailer. But I think that we're going to find is that there are some movies that we aren't thinking about right now because they're not the things that we cover this far out in production that will surprise us. Things like this year's Birdman, things like Whiplash, which is a tiny little movie, you know, that you go and you see and it blows your mind. But Star Wars.
Okay, Jurassic World, in addition to what she said, Jurassic World for me. Yeah, again, I mean, I think the conclusion of Hunger Games is going to be interesting. If I'm not like champing at the bit to see it, but I think it's going to be a cool sort of moment for at least blockbusters next year. And yeah, I agree. Like a lot of times when movies that are not even on my radar until I'm into the year, and then I'm like, oh wow, this movie was really good. So yeah, but Jurassic World, I have to put that out there. And what about Terminator for you?
Oh yeah, I mean that's a total curiosity. I will say that I'm going into Terminator with a complete open mind, and I really want it to be good. It doesn't mean that I ultimately will think it's good, but yeah, for sure. I mean, I love that franchise.
I have 3 movies that I'm really stoked to see. One is Spectre.
Oh yeah,
theme song. Spectre, because I'm a huge James Bond fan, and I really do love Daniel Craig's Bond, and I loved Skyfall. I know it seems to retroactively become this sort of divisive movie.
I liked it.
I thought it was great, and so I can't wait to see what they're going to do with Spectre and bring back that very key old school Bond element, you know, making it more like the classic Bond. So I think it's going to be an interesting challenge. I'm also really looking forward to Inside Out from Pixar, because the stuff that we've seen from that looks really cool.
Yeah.
But there's a movie with a very personal kind of slant for me that I really cannot wait to see, and that's a movie called Black Mass. Well, it might not end up being called that, but it's about Boston gangster. I'm a Boston guy. Boston gangster Whitey Bulger, played by Johnny Depp, and this really was the case of Whitey Bulger and sort of him corrupting the FBI agents who were his handlers, who used him as an informant, and basically literally got away with murder for 30 years, and they knew about it. And in fact, his FBI handler is now in jail. This is a hugely important story in the history of Boston, and Bostonians themselves are kind of over it. They're sick of hearing about it. But, you know, Affleck and Damon were trying to get this made, and they ended up kind of getting screwed out of it. I would have loved to have seen my hometown boys make a version of it, but I love Scott Cooper as a director for it. I really like his style, and he's the guy who did Crazy Heart, Out of the Furnace, and Johnny Depp. Really, this could be the role where people take him seriously again. So for that reason, these are the 3 movies I'm stoked to see. You guys tell us in the comments what 2015 movies you can't wait to see. Now we have to start wrapping this up, but I'm sorry, Hobbit, we have no time for you. He's the Matt Damon to our Jimmy Fallon. No, The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, is opening up this weekend. Or it's already out.
It's open, already made what, $24 million.
Yeah, and it's made $146.7 million and counting overseas already. But you know, we think it's gonna, you know, obviously it'll be #1, but it's got a lot of competition from Annie, which isn't good. And then Night at the Museum.
You know, as I say, good.
Yeah, I mean, although the little girl plays Annie is great. But everything else in the movie didn't really work for me.
She was the lead in Beasts of the Southern
Wild. Yeah, she was Oscar nominated, wasn't she?
Lindsay Wallace.
Yeah, Night at the Museum 3, The Secret of the Tomb. But rather than like box office prognosticate, Since this is the end of the road for Peter Jackson's time in Middle Earth, at least as far as we know, what do you think ultimately? How do you think his trilogies of the Middle Earth saga, his Middle Earth saga, how do you think they'll be remembered? Did they go back to the well too often on this one? Did they actually ultimately hurt?
I think the
franchise?
decision to split Hobbit into 3 movies was questioned at the time it happened and will be questioned later. But just from a story perspective, I think it got stretched a little thin. I ultimately think that the Hobbit movies are not going to appear as bad, in retrospect as like people right now. I think people are really sick of it, but like 10 years from now, I think they'll be fine movies. It's a little.
I think people will still
trilogy.
be, bemoaning the prequels, but I don't think they'll. I think the Hobbit stuff will be kind of a non-conversation.
Yeah. Agreed. But Lord of the Rings, the first 3 movies were so special. They were happening at a time when fantasy was like kind of not in vogue, and then when they happened, it kind of was like, oh, hey, this can be, you can make an epic movie. And I personally think Fellowship is the best movie of all 6.
So is that also your favorite of the Tolkien adaptations here?
I would say that and Return of the King. Return of the King?
Return of the King.
Yeah, I was like second guessing myself. Return of the King.
Did he return?
No matter what, you can never take that moment away where Aragorn's like, you bow to no man. That still makes me tear up. When I see it now, and I'm like, that was such a payoff, the end of that movie. Even though we talk about the false endings and all this stuff, like the end of that movie felt like the end of something, and the end of Hobbit, I feel like doesn't feel the same.
It's a ...
But it's also not meant to, right?
But it's also, you don't. That's the biggest crime for me of Battle of the 5 Armies is you don't feel any. I didn't feel anything at the end of it. I felt no.
I had to pee.
Weight had come. Yeah. Well, I felt the weight of something.
One of these days, we're gonna have a conversation about how, when you choose the moment to leave the movie to pee, because it's a strategic decision.
It is a really strategic decision. I held out because I kept thinking it was gonna end.
Oh man.
And I kept getting more and more upset because I just really had to pee. But that tells me something, because I saw, and this is a movie that not everybody loves, but Warrior. With Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton, and I love that movie. I had to pee the whole time, and I held it the whole. This is so much information, but I held it the whole time because I was so riveted by that story and by
even
those
though when people were getting kicked in the midsection where the bladder is,
I contend that what hurt that movie, what lost it the credit that it deserves, is that people don't understand UFC and they have a judgment.
But also,
it
opened not too long after The Fighter, and it's a similar conceit of 2 brothers.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
but let's get back to Lord of the Rings
and
and Tolkien and all that. Do you have a favorite of the Tolkien movies, or did that franchise ultimately, did it mean anything to you?
I think the Lord of the Rings trilogy, certainly. The Hobbit franchise, I am still wrestling with. I think it is very bloated. I really think they're just those. I think that this final film should be the half-hour ending climax, and it would have been a great half-hour climax to one movie. Not 2 even. Most people are like, well, it should have been 2. I think it should have been 1 movie. And this is that 1 3-hour movie, and this is what should have been the half-hour end, and I think it would have been great.
Yeah.
But that is not what happened. And I will probably not change my mind that's how it should have been done. Okay. The Lord of the Rings, I think, is a different story.
For me, my favorite of the entire series, probably, it's kind of a toss-up though. There are things I love about Fellowship, but that Helm's Deep battle and 2 Towers is just so awesome. And then Return of the King, I absolutely love that scene at the end of the movie, well, one of the ends, where the hobbits go to the bar. 4 hobbits walk into a bar, and and it's a quiet scene, and they're just looking at each other, and it's basically guys who just came home from war, but you can't really go home again. Life is the same, but you've been so deeply affected and altered by this experience. And that was the sort of weight and the sort of just the gravity of the change that the characters went through that is absolutely missing, in my opinion, from Battle of the Five Armies, and that makes it such a.
Also, it doesn't have the moment of Strider opening up the doors, which is just hot.
And by the way, like that scene, I think the other thing about that scene that's crazy is like these guys are just back in in the Shire, and nobody around them knows that they just saved really the entire world, like seriously saved the entire world, and they're not bragging about it either, which is awesome. They're just like, hey, we're back to life, but. Holy man, you know, like I just said, holy man for the second time.
That's right.
Holy man.
Do you have that Eddie Murphy movie on the brain?
No, no. My mom always used to say, "Holy man, holy man."
I will say that I enjoyed seeing Smaug.
Smaug!
In this fight, but
I did like Distillation
Smaug in the last film and in this one basically was the dragon equivalent of Sam Jackson in the diner in Pulp Fiction saying, "Mine's the wallet that says badass mother." Like that is like the whole time he's like, "My claws, but have I told you about my fire?" Like,
wow.
Don't mess with. It's basically like don't mess with Smaug is what he says.
That's what he's like in the book too.
Like I know,
he comes across as just boastful.
But on film, it comes across as like just this guy who.
Yeah, you shouldn't be rooting for the dragon more than the dwarves.
But it
and that's part of the problem with Battle of Five Armies is I didn't like anybody in the movie. They were all a-holes.
But it comes across as like this person who rightfully is boasting about being the baddest one around.
Yeah.
Until that arrow hits him.
It's true. It's his like epic rap battle.